With that, I invite you to join me seated in a comfortable space. I'll join you in hero's pose on my knees. As I said, I'm Lerin with Yellow Umbrella Yoga, and I'm glad you're here. Thank you for practicing with me, whether live or on your time. I invite you to have some water or tea, any kind of nourishment nearby to sustain you throughout practice, or pause and take a break at any time. As you settle into your space, I invite you to notice all the points of your body that are supported against gravity. If kneeling, that might be knees and shins, maybe the tops of your feet as they press into the earth. You might take a moment to set an intention for this practice, whether it's just to learn or to be curious, maybe try something new. Maybe you're here for softness or strength or something in between. I invite you to make this yours. Take what you need and leave what you don't. You might take a moment to consider anything that's distracting, anything you can set aside until later to kind of create space for your focus and whatever your intentions may be here and now. I'll offer from my own practice this month the idea of creativity. If you're interested in doing your own research on chakras, the chakra in the body associated with creativity is the sacral chakra. So many of the poses involved in this practice will be intended to offer benefit for the sacrum, making space at the base of the spine, adding length to the legs and the side body, everything that kind of extends out from there. So maybe that piques some curiosity and you can go do some more learning on your own. But if you're not sure what intention to set for your practice, I offer mine of creativity. Maybe you explore just creating a pace with your breath or creating a sense of focus with your movement. Do with that what you will. If you're like me, it might take a few minutes to settle into stillness. Sometimes there's still a lot going on in the mind. So you're welcome to join me with some bilateral activation for what is called monkey mind. You might take both palms out to each side, open towards the sky, and let the fingertips curl softly, almost like you're holding half of a grapefruit in each hand. And alternating sides, left and right, you can take turns, maybe tapping your fingertips on your skull. You could choose to make a little pitter patter, or just notice the connection of touch from fingertips to top of your head. And do this as fast or slow as you'd like. Maybe take 5, 7, 10 breaths as you explore this with me. You might begin to notice some warmth on the tops of the shoulders, maybe the space between the shoulder blades or underneath the armpits, on the front of the chest. You might notice this takes a bit of energy and choose to slow down and regulate your breath as we begin to create this warmth. Whenever you feel finished, you're invited to let both hands settle to your sides or in your lap. Tune into the sound of your breath. Notice its texture, its temperature. No need to change it or decide if it's good or bad. Just notice it. It's constant. And again, as we continue to settle, you could choose to let your hands rest in your lap or bring one fingertip to trace the outline of the opposite hand. Might notice the sensation of the outline of that hand, the space between the webbing of each set of fingers. You could go each direction, perhaps, forward and backward. Noticing how much information your one fingertip can take in. And choose to continue or change sides or let your hands rest if that feels best. Maybe beginning to tune into your body, your breath, your experience right now. Decide if you're ready for some movement. You might look around and prepare however you will, maybe bringing some props along, as I mentioned. You're invited to join me on hands and knees whenever you please. As you can see, I like to have a blanket underneath my knees for a little extra cushion, a moment of self-care. An option to place your hands on blocks or books or right on the floor as you find tabletop pose. From here, I invite you to step your handprints forward one space and shift your shoulders over your wrists, coming into a low plank. From here, maybe you explore small circles with your hips. I've heard this called marauding bear. It's okay if it doesn't feel like a perfect circle or if one direction feels better than the other. You can just create a shape all your own here. Circling the hips toward one wrist and then the other, then maybe out to the side as they rotate back towards your heels, stretching out the arms and waistline, maybe changing directions. And when you feel complete with that, you might choose to bring your handprints back underneath your shoulders for tabletop and explore cat-cow. Notice your front hip points and let them droop towards the floor as your belly sags. The belly button can be heavy as you take a deep breath here. Press the mat away with both hands and look at the short edge of your mat if you're using one. As you exhale, reverse this motion for your spine, choosing to tuck your tail and round your low back. Like a Halloween cat, press the mat away with both hands and arch the upper back, making space between your shoulder blades. Choose to tuck your chin and look at your lap. Find your flow. Repeat this for 3 or maybe 5 breaths. Inhaling to find cow pose, letting your belly sag and stretch. Imagine scrubbing the mat towards your knees with your hands to activate that front body stretch. Exhale to round your back, beginning with the tailbone curling towards the heels and lifting the spine towards the ceiling as you tuck your chin. Continuing to move with your breath, make this yours. I'll meet you with a neutral spine. We'll prepare for a low lunge. So you might choose to release your hands from the mat, coming up to tall kneeling. If you have blocks or other support available, I invite you to bring them along. Just to use like stilts for your hands to bring the earth up closer to you rather than asking you to fold farther than your body may want to go. All right, doesn't matter which side you start with, choose left or right and step 1 foot forward. Before we go farther from here, you might pay attention to where your kneeling knee is placed in relationship to your foot stamped in front. Maybe make space between those imaginary railroad tracks and notice if this offers stability. From here, you might imagine your hips becoming heavy as you curl your tailbone towards your front heel. That might keep you from falling as far forward as maybe you know you're able to go, but I invite you to bring your awareness to the front of your hip flexor on the hip that is extended behind. And maybe grip the mat with your front foot, noticing the strength of your lunging knee and leg. And your hands can use some support if you've provided it with blocks or other props. You also have the option to sort of lay your rib cage or half of your upper body over your leg and reach for the floor, whatever feels right for you. Notice your breath if you've started to hold it here. If so, it might feel nice to back out a bit from wherever you've landed in this pose. See if you can find a comfortable seat here long enough to take 3 more breaths. Another option could be to float your hands up overhead. Nice work. As you're ready, find your way to support as you guide your hips back towards your heel behind you, keeping your front foot glued to the mat. It's okay if that knee does not become straight. Just allow it to be heavy towards the floor, letting gravity do some work for you here. Again, can you find a comfortable seat such that you can take 3 long breaths here? Creating space in the body with a little bit of patience. All right, option to lunge forward one more time, curling the tailbone towards the front heel. Maybe choosing to float your hands up overhead. Find your way back to tall kneeling to switch sides. Once again, take time to create a steady foundation, making space between the imaginary railroad tracks you have set up beneath your stance. Drive your back shin into the mat. Notice the sensation on the front of that open hip. And once again, maybe bringing the hands to the hips this time, you could curl your tailbone under towards your heel in front of you. And maybe your hips slide forward towards that foot a bit as you lunge, and maybe it's a very tiny movement, invisible to the naked eye. Again, allow your hands to find support if it's available, or drape yourself over your knee to reach towards the floor. And you take 3 to 5 breaths here. If your arms begin to feel crowded on top of tall blocks, remember that you can lower the height of them. Or you can try that next time you're in a studio setting, perhaps, where props are provided. Nice work. Sometimes just allowing is a thing of great effort. As you're ready, I invite you to lengthen your front leg, pressing those toes into the mat in front of you as your hips glide backward towards your heel behind you. Bring support along for your hands as you'd like, and remember that your leg does not have to be straight. It might be rather bent as you just ask the hamstring to find some length, letting gravity do some work for you. Nice work. Option to lunge one more time, curling your tailbone under as your hips glide forward towards your front heel. Adjust your support as needed or choose to float your hands into the air up above. This is kind of a low warrior 1 variation. And be easy with yourself as you make your way back to tall kneeling. Choose to set your props aside if they're in your way, maybe finding tabletop again. From here, we'll play a little bit of a brain game as we find bird dog pose. First, extend one set of toes backward. I'll begin with the right. Letting the toes grip the mat as you reach the heel towards the floor behind you, letting the whole back of your right leg be long. From here, there's an option to add on lifting the left hand, the opposite hand. It might feel kind of strange. If you feel like you're going to fall over, check and see if you've lifted both hand and foot on the same side. Opposite sides will offer more support. All right, and last option to add on by lifting that extended leg behind you so you're reaching in a long line. And then bring handprint and knee back to tabletop and switch sides however you'd like. Your toes can reach the mat. Your hand and foot can lift as your toes point towards the floor behind you. Take 3 to 5 breaths as you switch sides. Maybe pairing the breath with the movement, creating warmth from the back of the body, those core muscles supporting the spine. Nice work. I'll meet you back in tabletop. Nice. From here, I invite you to return to tall kneeling.